To learn that Muhammad, the founder of Islam, had sexual relations with a 9-year-old girl is one of the most disturbing facts of Islam's prophet for non-Muslims. As such, some critics of Islam have called Muhammad a pedophile for marrying Aisha. This, however, seriously upsets the Muslims, for they see their prophet as the perfect model of a servant of God, and as the supreme exemplar by which all men should endeavor to be. As the Quran says in Surah 33:21, "Certainly, you have in the Apostle of Allah an excellent exemplar." Nonetheless, Muhammad's relationship with the 9-year-old girl poses a serious issue for Muslims, especially when it comes to sharing their faith with non-Muslims. Some Muslims, greatly embarrassed by Muhammad's marriage to a prepubescent girl, try rewriting history by claiming, contrary to every available Muslim source, that Aisha must have been much older than history demands. Other Muslims use moral relativism to justify the marriage by proposing that even though in modern times it may be wrong to have sex with young girls, such a thing wasn't wrong in 7th century Arabia. Still, other Muslims attempt to give morally sufficient reasons for Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. That is to say, some justifiable state of affairs achieved through Muhammad's relationship with Aisha. Now, because pedophilia is one of the gravest charges that can be leveled against someone, the term pedophilia must not be used carelessly. With that in mind, we shall carefully examine Muhammad's relationship with Aisha and see whether the Muslim defense of his marriage to Aisha holds up, evoking, of course, the Western principle that one is innocent until proven guilty. First Muslim defense. Aisha was older than 9 when Muhammad first had sex with her. Confronted by arguments presented by critics of Islam, Muslim apologists try to deny that Aisha was very young, as critics repeatedly claim, by occasionally piecing together information from different accounts. Maulana Muhammad Ali writes, "The popular misconception as to Aisha's age may be removed here. Isaba, speaking of the Holy Prophet's daughter Fatima, says that she was about 5 years older than Aisha. It is a well-established fact that Fatima was born when the Kaaba was being rebuilt, 5 years before the call. Aisha was therefore born in the year of the call, or a little before it, and she could not have been less than 10 years at the time of her marriage with the Holy Prophet in the 10th year of the call. And as the period between her marriage and its consummation was not less than 5 years, because the consummation took place in the 2nd year of the flight, it follows that she could not have been less than 15 at that time. The popular account that she was 6 years at marriage and 9 years at the time of consummation is decidedly not correct, because it supposes the period between the marriage and its consummation to be only 3 years, and this is historically wrong." Response. The historical evidence for Muhammad's marriage to Aisha when she was still a child is too strong to be ignored. It's evident that not once did Ali provide a single quotation from any Muslim source that claims Aisha was a teenager when Muhammad had sex with her, and it's no wonder, since no such source exists. Ali's selective and carefully edited defense, which provides no reference whatsoever, utterly ignores the many accounts we have that record the age of Aisha when Muhammad consummated the marriage with her. A great number of these accounts come from Aisha herself. Without a doubt, the evidence that Muhammad married the child Aisha is as compelling as the evidence for any other well-founded fact of Islam. We possess abundant traditions from Islam's most trusted historical sources, which report Muhammad's marriage proposal with a 6 or 7-year-old Aisha, as well as his consummation of that marriage with a 9-year-old Aisha. For example, Sahih al-Bukhari 3896 narrated Hisham's father. Khadijah died 3 years before the Prophet departed to Al-Madinah. He stayed there for 2 years or so, and then he wrote the marriage contract with Aisha when she was a girl of 6 years of age, and he consummated that marriage when she was 9 years old. Sahih al-Bukhari 5158 narrated Urwa. The Prophet wrote the marriage contract with Aisha while she was 6 years old, and consummated his marriage with her while she was 9 years old, and she remained with him for 9 years till his death. Sahih Muslim 33:10. Aisha reported, Allah's Apostle married me when I was 6 years old, and I was admitted to his house when I was 9 years old. Sahih Muslim 33:11. Aisha reported that Allah's Apostle married her when she was 7 years old, and she was taken to his house as a bride when she was 9, and her dolls were with her, and when he, the Holy Prophet, died she was 18 years old. Sunan Abu Dawood 21:16. Aisha said, The Apostle of Allah married me when I was 7 years old. The narrator Sulaiman said, or 6 years. He had intercourse with me when I was 9 years old. These are just a few examples of early Muslim traditions which report Muhammad's marriage to the child Aisha. But let this suffice to prove that Aisha most definitely wasn't 15 years of age when the consummation took place, like some Muslims would have you believe. Along with these traditions concerning Aisha's age, a variety of hadiths also give details about how the relationship began and progressed. Sahih al-Bukhari 3895 narrated Aisha that the Prophet said to her, You have been shown to me twice in my dream. I saw you pictured on a piece of silk, and someone said to me, This is your wife. When I uncovered the picture, I saw that it was yours. I said, If this is from Allah, it will be accomplished. After Muhammad had a dream about Aisha, who was about 6 years of age around this time, he began to ask her father Abu Bakr for her hand in marriage. Understandably, Abu Bakr did not approve at first, but Muhammad was able to convince him to agree. Sahih al-Bukhari 5081 narrated Urwa, The Prophet asked Abu Bakr for Aisha's hand in marriage. Abu Bakr said, But I am your brother. The Prophet said, You are my brother in Allah's religion and his book, but she, Aisha, is lawful for me to marry. Afterwards, the marriage contract was written, but Aisha became seriously ill. So Muhammad waited for 3 years to take her into his house and consummate the marriage. Sahih al-Bukhari 3894 narrated Aisha, My marriage contract with the Prophet was written when I was a girl of 6 years. We came to Al-Madinah and we dismounted at the place of Bani al-Harith bin Khazraj. Then I got ill and my hair fell down. Later on, my hair grew again and my mother, Ruman, came to me while I was playing in a swing with some of my girlfriends. She called me and I went to her, not knowing what she wanted to do to me. She caught me by the hand and made me stand at the door of the house. I was breathless then, and when my breathing became normal, she took some water and rubbed my face and head with it. Then she took me into the house. There in the house I saw some Ansari women who said, Best wishes and Allah's blessing and good luck. Then she entrusted me to them, and they prepared me for the marriage. Unexpectedly, Allah's messenger came to me in the forenoon, and my mother handed me over to him, and at that time I was a girl of 9 years of age. As soon as Aisha joined Muhammad's household, she became his favorite wife, even though he already had had several other wives. Naturally, Muhammad's other wives begged him for equal treatment, to no avail. Sahih al-Bukhari 2581 narrated Urwa that Aisha said, The wives of Allah's messenger were in 2 groups. Urwa added one group consisted of Aisha, Hafsa, Safiya, and Sauda, and the other group consisted of Salama and the other wives of Allah's messenger. The Muslims knew that Allah's messenger loved Aisha, so if any of them had a gift and wished to give to Allah's messenger, he would delay it till Allah's messenger had come to Aisha's home, and then he would send his gift to Allah's messenger in her home. The group of Salama discussed the matter together and decided that Salama should request Allah's messenger to tell the people to send their gifts to him in whatever wife's house he was. Salama told Allah's messenger of what they had said, but he did not reply. Then those wives, asked Salama about it. She said, He did not say anything to me. They asked her to talk to him again. She talked to him again when she met him on her day, but he gave no reply. When they asked her, she replied that he had given no reply. They said to her, Talk to him till he gives you a reply. When it was her turn, she talked to him again. He then said to her, Do not hurt me regarding Aisha, as the divine revelations do not come to me on any of the beds except that of Aisha. Hence, Aisha held a place of special favor among Muhammad's wives, which created a considerable amount of conflict among the women. Now, because it can be said with certainty that historically Aisha was a child at the time that her marriage to Muhammad was consummated, critics have on occasion charged Muhammad's preference for Aisha as a sign that he prefers young girls. This view does have some amount of support found in Sahih al-Bukhari. Sahih al-Bukhari 2967 narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, When I took the permission of Allah's messenger, he asked me whether I had married a virgin or a matron, and I replied that I had married a matron. He said, "Why hadn't you married a virgin who would have played with you, and you would have played with her?" I replied, "O Allah's Messenger, my father died, or was martyred, and I have some young sisters. So I felt it not proper that I should marry a young girl like them, who would neither teach them manners nor serve them." Sahih al-Bukhari 6130, narrated Aisha, "I used to play with the dolls in the presence of the Prophet, and my girlfriends also used to play with me. When Allah's Messenger used to enter my dwelling place, they used to hide themselves, but the Prophet would call them to join and play with me. The playing with the dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time, as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty." Nonetheless, it should be pointed out that if Muhammad was genuinely obsessed with young girls, he could have married more young girls as his wives. In time, Muhammad gained absolute authority over Medina and Mecca later on as well. Yet he never built for himself a harem of young girls. However, that does not mean he never planned on having one. Muhammad had desires to marry other young girls other than Aisha, as the following shows. In the riwayah of Yunus II recorded that the apostle saw her, Ul Fadl, when she was a baby crawling before him, and said, "If she grows up and I am still alive, I will marry her." But he died before she grew up, and Sufyan bi al-Aswad bi Abdul Asad al-Maksumi married her, and she bore him Rizq and Lubab. Muhammad saw Habiba, the daughter of Abbas, while she was Fatim, age of nursing, and he said, "If she grows up while I am still alive, I will marry her." Fortunately, he died before he married either of these young girls. Though Aisha was the only child virgin that he married, this leads one to wonder why he would have any intention to marry Aisha, or any young girl for that matter. Muhammad gives us the reason why he would marry young girls in Sahih al-Bukhari. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, "I was accompanying the Prophet on a journey and was riding a slow camel that was lagging behind the others. When we approached Medina, I started going towards my house. The Prophet said, 'Where are you going?' I said, 'I have married a widow.' He said, 'Why have you not married a virgin to fondle with each other?' I said, 'My father died and left daughters, so I decided to marry a widow, an experienced woman, to look after them.' He said, 'Well done.'" Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, "While we were returning from Ghazwa, holy battle, with the Prophet, I started driving my camel fast. As it was a lazy camel, a rider came behind me and pricked my camel with a spear he had with him. And then my camel started running as fast as the best camel you may see. Behold, the rider was the Prophet himself. He said, 'What makes you in such a hurry?' I replied, 'I am newly married.' He said, 'Did you marry a virgin or a matron?' I replied, 'A matron.' He said, 'Why didn't you marry a young girl so that you may play with her and she with you?' When we were about to enter Medina, the Prophet said, 'Wait so that you may enter Medina at night, so that the lady of unkempt hair may comb her hair, and the one whose husband has been absent may shave her pubic region.'" Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, "When I got married, Allah's Apostle said to me, 'What type of lady have you married?' I replied, 'I have married a matron.' He said, 'Why? Don't you have a liking for the virgins and for fondling them?' Jabir also said, 'Allah's Apostle said, 'Why didn't you marry a young girl so that you might play with her and she with you?'" These statements from Muhammad thus shows that the reason why he married Aisha as a young child virgin was so he could play with her by fondling her, i.e., stroke her in a sexual manner. His comments also apparently show that Muhammad did have a liking for young virgin girls, and did have plans on creating a harem of young virgin girls, but died before he could pursue it. This is only made worse because Muslim sources show that Muhammad was born in 570 AD, the year of the elephant, and that he migrated to Medina, known as the Hijrah, in the year 622-23 AD, which proves he was 51 to 52 years old at the time, and consummated his marriage with Aisha when he was 54-55 years old. Thus, Muhammad, a man in his 50s, had a sexual liking for 3 prepubescent girls, one of which he married. And if he had lived long enough to wait for the other 2 young girls he desired to marry, he would have been 60 to 62 years old. Is this then enough proof to support the accusation that Muhammad had a perverted obsession with prepubescent girls? I would say, maybe not a perverted obsession, but certainly a perverted liking of prepubescent girls. Nevertheless, I caution the critics to be careful when proclaiming such an accusation. To summarize, the overwhelming evidence makes it perfectly clear. 1. Muhammad did have sex with Aisha when she was still just a child at the age of 9. 2. Muhammad pursued this relationship when he dreamt about Aisha, who was 6 years old at the time. 3. Aisha was his favorite wife. 4. Muhammad very much had a sexual liking for prepubescent girls. Faced with all this historical data proving the age of Aisha was very young, it should be no surprise that Muslims who deny her young age do so out of sheer embarrassment. Second Muslim defense: morality is relative to one's culture. Another tactic Muslims use in defending Muhammad's marriage to Aisha is the appeal to moral relativism. The argument states that since diverse cultures possess different standards of morality, it's not right to criticize a culture's standards on the basis of another's own ethical standards. Note the responses that Maqsood Jafri and Abdur Rahman Squires give. The Arabs practice polygamy. In the wake of custom, the Prophet Muhammad married some ladies. Hazrat Khadija was 15 years older than him at the time of marriage. Most of them were his age's sake. In his 50s, he married Hazrat Aisha, the daughter of Hazrat Abu Bakr, when she was just bloomed to youth. Hinting this marriage, some of the Orientalists charge Prophet Muhammad as a pedophile. It was not only the Prophet Muhammad who had married a young girl, but even the father of Hazrat Aisha, Hazrat Abu Bakr, had also married a young girl in his 60s. It was part of the prevalent Arab culture and custom, hence not to be taken seriously. The large majority of Islamic jurists say that the earliest time which a marriage can be consummated is at the onset of sexual maturity, meaning puberty. Since this was the norm of all Semitic cultures, and it still is the norm of many cultures today, it is certainly not something that Islam invented. Therefore, because the practice of marrying young girls was part of the prevalent Arab culture and custom, it must not be taken seriously as a criticism against Islam. Response: Islam is utterly inconsistent with moral relativism. This defense is so contradictory for Muslims because when they defend Muhammad's moral superiority, they frequently hold that Muhammad condemned the immorality of Arab culture. When describing Muhammad's moral stance, Abul Ala Maududi states that, after spending his life in such chaste, pure, and civilized manner, there comes a revolution in Muhammad's being. He wearies of the darkness and ignorance, corruption, immorality, idolatry, and disorder which surrounded him on all sides. He wants to get hold of that power with which he might bring about the downfall of the corrupt and disorderly world and lay the foundations of a new and better one. He wanted to change the whole structure of society which had been handed down to them from time immemorial. Muslims are quick to point out immorality throughout the world, the West especially. Because of this, the message they present to us seem very inconsistent. When faced with any immoral practice in another culture other than theirs, Muslims proclaim with one voice, "We condemn these practices, for they are against the eternal, perfect, and unalterable law of God." Yet, when Muhammad's moral character is ever closely examined, Muslims cry foul, saying, "Don't judge Muhammad. You should remember that he was from a different culture. Marrying young girls was common in Arabia, and it still is, thanks to Muhammad's precedent. Different people have different moral standards, so no one should worry about Muhammad's sexual relationship with a 9-year-old girl." This irrational switch from moral absolutism to moral relativism is really illogical. If it's wrong for us to judge the immoral practices of Islam, then it's wrong for Muhammad and the Quran to condemn the immoral practices of Arabia. If it's acceptable to condemn immoral practices, then Muslims will need to find a better defense to criticisms of Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. It must be mentioned that, since Muhammad is considered in the Quran 33:21 as the supreme pattern of conduct, Muhammad's deeds are never wrong, as Islam claims. Put it simply, if Muslims are meant to follow Muhammad as their perfect pattern of conduct, and Muhammad had sexual relations with a 9-year-old Aisha, then marrying young girls shouldn't be wrong even in these modern times, since Muhammad is still the ideal model by which all Muslims conduct themselves. This is exactly the reason why child bride marriages continue on in Islamic countries. Muslim clerics acknowledge that they can't condemn this practice without first condemning Muhammad in the process. Third Muslim defense: Muhammad's marriage to Aisha was part of God's plan. Muslim apologists have advanced this idea that Muhammad's marriage to Aisha was a divine plan from God. That is to say, God had a really good reason for allowing it. Note these two responses from Abdul Hamid Siddiqui and Abdur Rahman Squires. It should be borne in mind that, like all acts of the Holy Prophet, even this marriage had a divine purpose behind it. Hazrat Aisha was a precocious girl and was developing both in mind and body with rapidity, peculiar to such rare personalities. She was admitted to the house of the Holy Prophet just at the threshold of her puberty, the most impressionable and formative period of her life. It was the Holy Prophet who nurtured her sensibilities and directed the growth of her faculties to the most fruitful channel, and thus she was made to play an eminent role in the history of Islam. Moreover, she was the only virgin lady to enter the house of the Holy Prophet and was thus very competent to share the feelings of other ladies of younger age who had numerous questions to ask from the Holy Prophet with regard to sexual ethics and morality. These ladies felt shy of asking them through the elderly wives of the Holy Prophet out of modesty. They could speak out of their minds comparatively more freely to Aisha, who was more or less of their own age group. Puberty is a biological sign which shows that a woman is capable of bearing children. Can anyone logically deny this? Part of the wisdom behind the Prophet Muhammad's marriage to Aisha just after she reached puberty is to firmly establish this as a point of Islamic law, even though it was already a cultural norm in all Semitic societies, including the one Jesus grew up in. The argument for Muslim apologists goes as follows. Muhammad's marriage to Aisha was for a divine purpose, because young girls who had questions about sex needed a voice in the Muslim community, and therefore the Prophet's young wife Aisha would fill that role. Moreover, Muhammad wanted to institute puberty as the proper age for marriage, and thus, in order to confirm this law, he chose to marry Aisha. Response: Muslims have failed to offer a sufficient reason for God to ordain the marriage. Many problems arise from this line of thinking. First, this kind of response can be used to justify almost any bad behavior. For example, let's say there's a husband on trial for beating his wife. As he takes the stand, he gives the excuse, "Your Honor, many women are victims of spousal abuse, and they need someone to talk to. Out of the kindness of my heart, I decided to beat my wife so that she would be able to comfort other women whose husbands beat them." Such an explanation would never be accepted, except, maybe every country under Islamic rule, where Quran 434 gives husbands the right to beat their wives. In any case, if Muhammad had just merely forbid sex with children, instead of willingly participating in it, young girls wouldn't need to worry about sex, and they wouldn't need to inquire Aisha. Second, it's not essential for a lawgiver to establish laws by implementing actions that produce a precedent. That is to say, it wasn't necessary for Muhammad to marry a young girl just to initiate a law about marrying girls who have reached puberty. Instead, he could have just formally sent out an edict as Islam's lawgiver, just like when he permitted husbands to beat their wives. Muhammad didn't need to beat his wives in order to institute it as Islamic law, though it must be mentioned that he did beat Aisha, as recorded in Sahih Muslim 2127. In the same way, when American legislators proclaim that killing anyone in self-defense is acceptable, none argue that the legislator has to go out and kill a person in self-defense in order for the law to exist and remain valid. Therefore, the argument that Muhammad had to marry Aisha to institute puberty as the suitable age for marriage utterly fails. Third, for Muslims to claim that Aisha was a precocious child goes beyond what the evidence shows us. As shown earlier, Aisha herself reveals that, before she was taken to Muhammad's household, she was playing with her friends on a swing. The evidence reveals that Aisha was very much a normal little girl enjoying her childhood, not some young adult. Furthermore, Muhammad didn't marry her because she was more mature of her age. He married Aisha simply because he dreamt about her. Fourth, God could never have used Muhammad's marriage to Aisha to institute puberty as the minimum age of marriage, because the Quran obviously permits marriage to prepubescent girls. As Surah 2:228 states, if a Muslim man desires to divorce his wife, he must wait till she completes 3 monthly cycles, or 3 periods, just to be sure she hasn't become pregnant. This, however, prompted the question, what of the wives who don't go through monthly cycles? How long must the husbands wait to divorce them? The Quran gives us an answer in Surah 65:4, as it provides us with the divorce rules for 1. Women who don't go through monthly cycles because of old age. 2. Girls who don't go through monthly cycles because of their very young age. And 3. Women and girls who don't go through monthly cycles because they're pregnant. The verse states that if a Muslim man wants to divorce his wife, whether she's old, pregnant, or a prepubescent girl, he has to wait 3 months. There is, however, an exception to this rule found in Quran 33:49, which says, "O you who believe, when you marry believing women, and then divorce them before you have sexual intercourse with them, no iddah, or divorce prescribed period, have you to count in respect of them. So give them a present and set them free, that is, divorce them in a handsome manner." Hence, Muslims who want to divorce their prepubescent wives have to wait 3 months because they already had sexual intercourse with them. We wouldn't want the little girls to get pregnant, now would we? Quran 65:4 reads, "And those of your women as have passed the age of monthly courses, for them the iddah, if you have doubts about their periods, is 3 months. And for those who have no course, i.e. they are still immature, their iddah prescribed period is 3 months likewise, except in case of death. And for those who are pregnant, whether they are divorced or their husbands are dead, their iddah prescribed period is until they deliver their burdens. And whosoever fears Allah and keeps his duty to him, he will make his matter easy for him." If one is still puzzled as to the meaning of this passage, then let's read 3 classic Muslim commentaries on Quran 65:4. Tafsir Ibn Kathir. Allah the Exalted clarifies the waiting period of the woman in menopause, and that is the one whose menstruation has stopped due to her older age. Her iddah is 3 months instead of the 3 monthly cycles for those who menstruate, which is based upon the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah. The same for the young who have not reached the years of menstruation. Their iddah is 3 months like those in menopause. Tafsir al-Jalalain. And as for those of your women who no longer expect to menstruate, if you have any doubts about their waiting period, their prescribed waiting period shall be 3 months, and also for those who have not yet menstruated because of their young age, their period shall also be 3 months. Tafsir Ibn Abbas. And for such of your women as despair of menstruation because of old age, if ye doubt about their waiting period, their period of waiting shall be 3 months. Upon which another man asked, "O Messenger of Allah, what about the waiting period of those who do not have menstruation because they are too young? Along with those who have it not because of young age, their waiting period is 3 months." Therefore, this Muslim response that God ordained Muhammad's marriage to Aisha in order to establish puberty as the minimum age for marriage fails, because it refutes the Quran itself, which shows that Muslim men can marry girls who haven't yet reached puberty. 5th, Muslims would find any excuse to justify Muhammad's marriage to Aisha because they're fully persuaded that anything Muhammad did was for some underlying divine purpose. When critics mention Muhammad's countless murders and assassinations, Muslims claim that these vicious acts were justifiable. When critics report the scope of Muhammad's polygamy, or his dealings in the slave trade, or his many robberies, Muslims give responses based on the idea that Muhammad was a marvelous moral exemplar. Likewise, when Muslims are faced with evidence for Muhammad's sexual relations with Aisha, they assume that there was a very good reason for it, yet they can't provide a single proof to back up their claims. In their desperation, they make up reasons for Muhammad's detestable behavior, i.e., the little girls needed a person to converse with about sexual matters. And they present these unfounded reasons as a defense for Muhammad's questionable morality. Regardless, non-Muslims don't have such firm trust in Muhammad's supposed moral perfection. When non-Muslims learn of Muhammad's violence, his avarice, his polygamy, and his approval of spousal abuse, we aren't so quick to absolve Muhammad of his evil deeds as Muslims are. It's for this reason that Muslim justifications for Muhammad's relationship to Aisha are empty and meaningless when offered up as a defense for his morally detestable deeds. Lastly, Muslim justifications for Muhammad's immoral behavior fail to take into account the problems that occur when having sex at such a young age. Most Muslims assume that just because a young girl has her first period, she is all of a sudden ready to carry and give birth to children. This old enough to bleed, old enough to breed frame of mind, apart from being revolting and repugnant, is utterly wrong. A 9-year-old girl is clearly not ready for sex or childbirth, even if she arrives at menses earlier than other prepubescent girls. Children's bodies at such a young age are still developing. When they become pregnant, their bodies begin redirecting nutritional resources to the growing fetus, robbing the developing girls of essential vitamins and minerals. Moreover, problems often arise from adolescent pregnancies, since the bodies of minor girls clearly aren't prepared to give birth. Western countries, free from the blind obedience to 7th century Arab morality, have for a long time recognized the dangers that adolescent pregnancies present. Muslim apologists frequently assert that marriage to minor girls was prevalent in biblical times. That may be true. However, this does not mean that God approved or supported such a practice. Many Christian nations have realized the potential dangers arising from pregnancies among adolescent girls and have raised the legal age for marriage. Muslim nations, on the other hand, have oftentimes been held back from such advancements, particularly by Muhammad himself. Interestingly, this contradicts the frequent Muslim claim that Muhammad was scientifically knowledgeable and that the Quran is a scientific masterpiece. In actuality, Muhammad's marriage to Aisha is the current cause of health problems and even death for minor girls throughout the Middle East and North Africa, as it has been influencing this type of disgusting practice for almost 14 centuries under the banner of Islam. The dangers of prepubescent and adolescent sex and pregnancies have even been well documented by the United Nations, which published this report in an effort to stop Islamic child marriage. Traditional cultural practices reflect values and beliefs held by members of a community for periods often spanning generations. Every social grouping in the world has specific traditional cultural practices and beliefs, some of which are beneficial to all members, while others are harmful to a specific group, such as women. These harmful traditional practices include female genital mutilation, forced feeding of women, early marriage, the various taboos or practices which prevent women from controlling their own fertility, nutritional taboos and traditional birth practices, son preferences and its implications for the status of the girl child, female infanticide, early pregnancy, and dowry price. Despite their harmful nature and their violation of international human rights laws, such practices persist because they are not questioned and take on an aura of morality in the eyes of those who practice them. Child marriage robs a girl of her childhood time necessary to develop physically, emotionally, and psychologically. In fact, early marriage inflicts great emotional stress as the young woman is removed from her parents' home to that of her husband and in-laws. Her husband, who will invariably be many years her senior, will have little in common with a younger teenager. It is with this strange man that she has to develop an intimate, emotional, and physical relationship. She is obliged to have intercourse, although physically she might not be fully developed. Health complications that result from early marriage in the Middle East and North Africa, for example, include the risk of operative delivery, low weight, and malnutrition resulting from frequent pregnancies and lactation in the period of life when the young mothers are themselves still growing. Early pregnancy can have harmful consequences for both young mothers and their babies. According to the UNICEF, no girl should become pregnant before the age of 18 because she is not yet physically ready to bear children. Babies of mothers younger than 18 tend to be born premature and have low body weight. Such babies are more likely to die in the first year of life. The risk to the young mother's own health is also greater. Poor health is common among indigent, pregnant, and lactating women. In many parts of the developing world, especially in rural areas, girls marry shortly after puberty and are expected to start having children immediately. Although the situation has improved since the early 1980s, in many areas the majority of girls under 20 years of age are already married and having children. Although many countries have raised the legal age for marriage, this has had little impact on traditional societies where marriage and childbearing confer status on a woman. An additional health risk to young mothers is obstructed labor, which occurs when the baby's head is too big for the orifice of the mother. This provokes vesicovaginal fistulas, especially when an untrained traditional birth attendant forces the baby's head out unduly. Contrary to Muslim claims, a girl 9 years of age clearly isn't ready for sex or for its potential consequences, i.e., pregnancy, giving birth, breastfeeding, and raising a child. It's an unnecessary danger that can easily be avoided if the marriage takes place several years later, where a much safer relationship can develop when the girl is at least 18 years old. Muslims sometimes reply by arguing that Aisha never became pregnant, so all of this doesn't matter. However, it most certainly does matter. Year after year, untold numbers of young girls who still play with their dolls are forced to live with husbands much older than they are. If one were to question these husbands, they wouldn't answer by saying it's part of Arabic culture. Rather, they would say it's not wrong since Muhammad did it too. Let's put it this way. Even if we accept the strange and unusual assertion that Aisha was in some way ready for sex and marriage, most 9-year-old girls most definitely aren't ready for sex and marriage. Yet, the practice of child bride marriages still persists to this day in most Muslim nations, primarily because Muslims consider Muhammad to be their greatest exemplar. Fourth Muslim defense. The average lifespan in Muhammad's day was so low that people had to marry young. Muslim debater Osama Abdallah contends that Muhammad's marriage to Aisha was justified, since it was necessary for people to marry early during Muhammad's time. Life 1,400 years ago was very rough in the too hot desert. From my personal knowledge, the average lifespan back then was 50 years. People used to die from all kinds of diseases. Both parents of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for instance, died natural deaths before he even knew them. Osama claims that because of the hot desert, people could die at any moment, and therefore they would intermarriage at a very young age in order to be sure that they could live together for as many years as they possibly can. Response: Muhammad was already more than 50 years old when he consummated his marriage to Aisha, so there was no need for him to marry such a young girl. Osama might have had a point if Muhammad was a young adolescent when he married Aisha, but Islam's prophet was already in his 50s. He was getting nearer to his final days than most available women, so why marry a child instead of an adult woman? The least Muhammad should have done is marry a fully developed 20-year-old, not some small girl who plays on a swing. By marrying to a very young Aisha, Muhammad essentially condemned her to live the life of a widow, because the Quran prohibited Muslims from marrying his widows, according to Surah 33:53. Aside from this, Osama's reasoning disregards the facts. It was not because the average lifespan was 50 years old that Muhammad married Aisha. Rather, his marriage to her was based on the facts that 1. Muhammad was dreaming about her, and 2. He used his position as a so-called prophet to convince Abu Bakr into giving up his daughter Aisha to marry him. Fifth Muslim defense. Other people have done it too, even Christians. Osama also utilizes the everybody's doing it so it's okay argument. Not only was it a custom in the Arab society to marry a young girl, it was also common in the Jewish society. The case of Mary, the mother of Jesus, comes to mind. In non-biblical sources, she was between 11 to 14 years old when she conceived Jesus. Mary had already been betrothed to Joseph before conceiving Jesus. Joseph was a much older man. Therefore, Mary was younger than 11 to 14 years of age when she was betrothed to Joseph. We Muslims would never call Joseph a child molester, nor would we refer to the Holy Ghost of the Bible that impregnated Mary as a rapist or adulterer. Response: besides committing the tu quo quo fallacy, this defense misses the point of the criticism against Muhammad. Tu quoque is a kind of fallacy that tries to disregard a criticism by pointing out some hypocrisy found in the critic. For example, let's say I'm a thief. I find a person stealing a car one day, and I say, "Stop, thief!" If the suspect committing the crime turns to see me and replies, "But you're a thief too, so it's not wrong for me to steal this car," then he has committed the tu quoque fallacy. It's not okay to steal simply because others steal as well. Muslims rely excessively on the tu quoque fallacy. When people are criticizing Islam for terrorism around the world, Muslims typically respond by saying, "But Americans are killing Arabs," as if this was a valid response to the criticism. In like manner, when a person says, "Look at all the people Muhammad killed," the typical Muslim response is, "Well, look at all the people that were killed in the Bible." For one to say that Joseph married a young girl in the New Testament does nothing to tackle the issue of Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. At best, such an argument would only present an inconsistency in the Christians. Yet, in actuality, the Muslim argument fails to even prove that, since the comparison is flawed for various reasons. First, there is absolutely no historical evidence showing Mary's age when she married Joseph. While it is true that in those times it was customary to marry young, Mary herself was not 12 years of age or younger. The internal language of the scriptures undoubtedly rejects the notion that Mary was 12 years old when she was betrothed to Joseph. In Mark 5:39-42, it says, "When Jesus came in, he said to them, 'Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping.' And they ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, 'Talitha kumi,' which is translated, 'Little girl, I say to you, arise.' Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement." So a girl that's 12 years old is a child according to Scripture. Yet, when Elizabeth speaks of Mary, she declares in the present tense in Luke 1:42, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." Nowhere is Mary spoken of as a child 12 years of age or younger in the New Testament. She's instead spoken of as a woman. And since there are no historical sources concerning her age, it's very much a probability that Mary was 18 to 20 years old. The point of all of this is, critics are criticizing Muhammad's marriage to Aisha based on what is factually known, i.e., that Aisha was 9 years old, while Muslims respond based on what is not known, i.e., the age of Mary. Second, it must be remembered that, biologically, 13-year-old girls are very distinct from 9-year-old girls. Normally, 9-year-old girls haven't reached menses. In regards to Osama's defense, a girl as old as 9 is, at best, entering the beginning phases of puberty, keeping in mind that puberty is a process which continues for 5 to 7 years. The average age that puberty begins for girls is 10, but let's suppose it begins at 9 years of age. This would mean that a 13-year-old girl is nearing the end of her puberty. Therefore, even if we allow for Mary to be 13 years old, there would still be an immense degree of difference between Mary and Aisha. Third, Muslim apologists seem to forget the fact that Joseph is not the ideal exemplar of morality for Christianity. Jesus Christ is the perfect moral exemplar for Christians. When critics keep pointing to Aisha's age, their reasoning goes as follows. You're telling me that Muhammad was the ultimate example of morality throughout all ages, and that I should believe everything he did and said was good? I can't believe that a person who had sexual relations with a little girl is considered the greatest man ever. Simply put, Muhammad is foundational to Islam. And if there's a problem with Muhammad, then there's certainly a problem with Islam. If Muhammad was immoral and perverse, then it becomes very difficult to take any of his revelations or teachings seriously. Therefore, it's irrational for Muslims to say, well, Joseph married a little girl too. Joseph is in no way foundational to Christianity. If an ancient text was found the next day, and this old text proved that Joseph was a murderer, it would have no effect on Christianity, because Joseph is not regarded as a prophet, is not a bringer of revelation, and is not even a significant figure in Christianity. Therefore, if a Muslim wants to prove that Christians are being inconsistent, then he or she needs to demonstrate that Jesus, Peter, Paul, or any other central figure in Christianity committed the same evil things as Muhammad did. Luckily, Jesus was without sin, and the apostles lived exemplary lives when they devoted their lives to Jesus Christ. Examples of Muslim responses of this kind can be found throughout the internet, as Muslim websites continuously mention that minor girls are married in many countries and that these minor girls at times give birth. There is no doubt that this happens. However, this fact has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not marrying a 9-year-old girl is morally acceptable for an extremely influential prophet like Muhammad. The very fact that Muslims are forced to turn to an "everyone's doing it" argument demonstrates that they have no more responses to give in defense of Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. Assessment. 2 interpretations of pedophile. It is irrefutable that Muhammad had sexual intercourse with the 9-year-old Aisha. Does this then prove that he was a pedophile? This question can only be answered once one knows the definition of pedophile. In everyday use, and in various dictionaries, including some medical dictionaries, a pedophile is described as any person who has a sexual attraction to children. For example, pedophilia is defined in Stedman's Medical Dictionary as the act or fantasy on the part of an adult of engaging in sexual activity with a child or children. Because Muhammad had sexual relations with a young girl, he would definitely be labeled a pedophile in this sense, and has been in many writings, sermons, and discussions. However, the term pedophile has a more precise clinical usage, and that is, a pedophile is a person who has an exclusive or primary sexual attraction to children. Case in point, pedophilia is defined in the Encyclopedia of Mental Disorders as a psychosexual disorder in which the fantasy or actual act of engaging in sexual activity with prepubertal children is the preferred or exclusive means of achieving sexual excitement and gratification. Now, Muhammad did have a sexual interest in women and girls of diverse ages, including Khadija, who was 15 years older than him. But since we have seen that in his older age, he desired to marry more young girls and had a primary preference to marry young virgin girls over matrons, it can be reasonably said that Muhammad was a pedophile in this sense as well. Apparently, it was easy for him to be a pedophile when proclaiming himself a prophet and justifying his immoral actions with his revelations. Still, critics should be informed about Muhammad's actions and teachings before accusing him of being a pedophile. Critics should also take care in using emotionally charged terms if they wish to continue having an ongoing conversation with Muslims. It's recommended to avoid this term as much as possible when witnessing to Muslims. Nonetheless, Muslims are too quick in disregarding arguments against Muhammad's marriage with Aisha. We can't just turn a blind eye to their prophet's marriage to a 9-year-old girl when Muslims try to convert us to Islam. Muslims believe Muhammad is their perfect example of a moral life, yet his marriage to Aisha contradicts their belief. If they want to present Muhammad as the standard of conduct for all mankind, Muslims have to deal with the numerous immoral things he has done, including the disastrous and unfortunate impact of his actions. Obviously, there's a far simpler yet extremely straightforward way to analyze the significance of Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. One must start by painting a mental picture of a morally perfect man. Muslims have been taught to believe that Muhammad was kind, compassionate, tolerant, humble, and trustworthy. He's viewed as a protector of widows and orphans, is steadfast when persecuted, provides for the poor, advocates for justice, prays constantly, routinely fasts, is loyal to his friends, patient with his enemies, adheres to God in all things, and never yields when tempted by evil. Now visualize this person in the same room with an innocent 9-year-old girl. He takes away the girl's doll, gets on top of her, and forcibly penetrates her with his penis. She has no idea what's going on because she is too young to understand what sex is. Terrified and confused, she begins to cry because of the pain and starts bleeding on the bed. Yet she tries to remain silent out of reverence for her new husband, who jeopardizes her life by having sex with her. If anyone is capable of maintaining the same picture of moral perfection throughout this illustration, then it's possible to possess the faith needed to become a Muslim. But if that person's picture of the perfect man is in conflict with Muhammad's deeds on many situations, then he'll have to search somewhere else for the perfect model of a human being. I would suggest looking up a man named Jesus of Nazareth.